Hello everyone, this is Mike History 2, and today I will be talking about Falklands War. So the Falklands War was a 10-week undeclared war between Argentina and the United Kingdom in 1982 over two British dependent territories in the South Atlantic, the Falklands Islands and its territorial dependencies, South Georgia and the South Sandwich Islands. In 1965, the United Nations called upon Argentina and the United Kingdom to reach a settlement of the sovereignty dispute. The British Foreign and Commonwealth Office saw the island as a nuisance and barrier to British trade in South America, so while confident of British sovereignty, was prepared to give the islands to Argentina. Now, when news of a proposed transfer broke in 1968, people sympathetic with the plight of the islanders were able to organize an effective parliamentary lobby to stop the plans to give the islands to Argentina. Negotiations continued but in general failed to make meaningful progress. Islanders refused to join Argentina on one side while Argentina would not compromise over sovereignty on the other. The Foreign and Commonwealth Office then tried to make the islands dependent on Argentina, hoping this would make the islanders more sympathetic to Argentine sovereignty. Communications agreement signed in 1971 created an air link. Later, YPF, the Argentine oil company, was given a monopoly in the islands. In 1980, a new Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, Nicholas Ridley, went to the Falklands trying to sell the islanders the benefits of a leaseback scheme, which met with strong opposition from the islanders. On returning to London in December 1980, he reported to Parliament, but was viciously attacked at what was seen as a sellout. In the period leading up to the war, and in particular following the transfer of power between the military dictators General Jorge Rafael Videla and General Roberto Eduardo Viola, late in March 1981, Argentina had been in the midst of devastating economic stagnation and large-scale civil unrest against the military junta that had been ruling the country since 1976. In December 1981, there was a further change in the Argentine military regime, bringing to office a new junta headed by General Leopoldo Galtieri, Air Brigadier Basilio Lami Dozo, and Admiral Jorge Anaya. Anaya was the main architect and supporter of a military solution for the long-standing claim over the islands, predicting that the United Kingdom would never respond militarily. Now, by opting for military action, the Galtieri government hoped to mobilize the long-standing patriotic feelings of Argentines toward the islands, and therefore distract people from the chronic economic problems and the ongoing human rights violations of its dirty war, bolstering its dwindling legitimacy. The newspaper La Prensa speculated on a step-by-step plan beginning with cutting off supplies to islands, ending in direct actions late in 1982 if the UN talks were fruitless. And the ongoing tension between the two countries of the islands increased on March 19th, when a group of Argentine scrap metal merchants, which in reality had been infiltrated by Argentine Marines, raised the Argentine flag as South Georgia Island, an act that would later be seen as the beginning of the war. The Royal Navy Ice Patrol vessel HMS Endurance was dispatched from Stanley to South Georgia on the 25th in response. The Argentine military junta, suspecting the United Kingdom would reinforce the South Atlantic forces, ordered the invasion of the Falkland Islands to be brought forward on the 2nd of April. The United Kingdom was initially taken by surprise by the Argentine attack on the South Atlantic Islands, even though it had been warned many times by Royal Navy Captain Nicholas Barker and others. Barker believed that the Defense Secretary John Nott's 1981 Defense White Paper, in which he had described plans to withdraw the Endurance, which was the UK's only ship in the South Atlantic, had sent a signal to the Argentines that the United Kingdom was unwilling and would soon be unable to defend its territories and subjects in the Falklands. On the 2nd of April 1982, Argentine forces began amphibious landings known as Operation Rosario on the Falkland Islands. The invasion was met with a nominal defense organized by the Falkland Islands Governor, Sir Rex Hunt, giving command to Major Mike Norman of the Royal Marines. The events of the invasion included the landing of Lieutenant Commander Guillermo Sanchez Sabarot's amphibious commandos group, the attack on Moody Brook Barracks, the engagements between the troops of Hugo Santillan and Bill Trollope at Stanley, and the final engagement and surrender at Government House. Now, the British had already taken action before the 2nd of April invasion. In response to events on South Georgia on the 29th of March, ministers decided to send the Royal Fleet Auxiliary, Fort Austin, south from the Mediterranean to support HMS Endurance, and the submarine HMS Spartan from Gibraltar, with HMS Splendid ordered south from Scotland the following day. Lord Carrington had wished to send a third submarine, but the decision was deferred due to concerns about the impact on operational commitments. Now, coincidentally, on the 26th of March, submarine HMS Superb left Gibraltar, and it was assumed in the press that it was also heading south. Now, the following day, during a crisis meeting headed by the Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, the Chief of the Naval Staff, Admiral Sir Henry Leach, advised them that Britain could and should send a task force if the islands are invaded. On the 1st of April, Leach sent orders to a Royal Navy force carrying out exercises in the Mediterranean to prepare to sail south. Following the invasion, on the 2nd of April, after an emergency meeting of the Cabinet, approval was given to form a task force to retake the islands. This was backed in an emergency session of the House of Commons the next day. Words of the invasion reached the United Kingdom from Argentine sources. A Ministry of Defense operative in London had a short telex conversation with Governor Hunt's telex operator, who confirmed that Argentines were on the island and in control. British military operations in the Falklands War were given the codename Operation Corporate, and the commander of the task force was Admiral Sir John Fieldhouse. On the 6th of April, the British government set up a war cabinet to provide day-to-day political oversight of the campaign. The war cabinet met at least daily until it was dissolved on the 12th of August. Now, although Margaret Thatcher is described as dominating the war cabinet, Lawrence Freedman notes in the official history of the Falklands campaign that she did not ignore opposition or fail to consult others. However, once a decision was reached, she did not look back. On March 31st, 1982, the Argentine ambassador to the United Nations, Eduardo Roca, tried garnering support against a British military buildup designed to thwart earlier UN resolutions calling for both countries to resolve the Falklands dispute peacefully. He did this because Argentina, based on inadequate intelligence gathering, was convinced a British task force was already on its way to the South Atlantic, and because of Britain's threat to use HMS Endurance to remove the scrap metal, so-called workers, from South Georgia, and any Argentine military action could then be justified as trying to counter Britain's use of force to evade complying with an earlier UN resolution. However, this Argentine approach to portray Britain as the aggressor came to nothing, mainly because, they weren't the aggressors. Now, on the 1st of April, London told the British ambassador to the UN, Sir Anthony Parsons, that an invasion was imminent and he should call an urgent meeting of the Security Council to get a favorable resolution against Argentina. Parsons had to get 9 affirmative votes from the 15 council members and to avoid a blocking vote from any of the other 4 permanent members. The meeting took place at 11 a.m. on the 3rd of April, New York time. The United Nations Security Council Resolution 502 was adopted by 10-1 and 4 abstentions. Now, this was a significant win for the United Kingdom, giving it the upper hand diplomatically. The draft resolution Parsons submitted had avoided any reference to the sovereignty dispute, instead it focused on Argentina's breach of Chapter 7 of the UN Charter, which forbids the threat or use of force to settle disputes. The resolution called for the removal only of Argentine forces, and this freed Britain to retake the islands militarily if Argentina did not leave, by exercising its right to self-defense that was allowed under the UN Charter. The British government had no plan for an invasion of the islands, however, and the task force was quickly put together from whatever vessels were available. Nuclear-powered submarine Conqueror set sail from France on April 4th, while the 2 aircraft carriers Invincible and Hermes in the company of escort vessels left Portsmouth only a day later. On its return to Southampton from a world cruise on the 7th of April, the ocean liner SS Canberra was requisitioned and set sails 2 days later with the 3 Commando Brigade aboard. Ocean liner Queen Elizabeth II was also requisitioned and left Southampton on the 12th of May with the 5th Infantry Brigade on board. The whole task force eventually comprised of 127 ships, 43 Royal Naval vessels, 22 Royal Fleet auxiliary ships, and 62 merchant ships. The retaking of the Falkland Islands was considered extremely difficult. The chances of British counter-invasion succeeding were assessed by the American Navy as a military impossibility. Firstly, the British were significantly constrained by the disparity in deployable air cover. The British had 42 aircraft, around 28 Sea Harriers and 14 Harrier GR.3 and which were available for air combat operations against around 122 serviceable jet fighters, of which about 50 were used as air superiority fighters, and the remainder strike aircraft in Argentina's air forces during the war. Crucially, the British lacked airborne early warning and control aircraft. And planning also considered the Argentine surface fleet and the threat posed by Exocet-equipped vessels of the two Type 209 submarines. Now, by mid-April, the Royal Air Force had set up the airbase of RAF Ascension Island on the mid-Atlantic British Overseas Territory of Ascension Island, including a sizable force of Avro Vulcan BMK-2 bombers, Handley Page Victor KMK-2 refueling aircrafts, and McDonnell Douglas Phantom FGR Mk2 fighters to protect them. Meanwhile, the main British naval task arrived at Ascension to prepare for active service. A small force had already been sent south to recapture South Georgia. And that's where I'm going to end for today. If you want to see what happens next and actually get the actual war, then don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.